The early hours of March 2014 will live long in the memory of those who were there. It was a Friday night, and New York City was buzzing as usual. And then suddenly it wasn't. In one terrifying instant, everything changed. An object fell from the sky above Manhattan. People looked up to see what they thought might be a shooting star, only to find it was something else entirely. A woman had fallen from a helicopter and plummeted 12 stories straight into the East River below. That woman was 26-year-old Phoebe Handsjuk, a photo editor and recent graduate from the University of Westminster in London. But how did she fall from a height of 12 stories without a parachute? How did she wind up at such a height in the first place? And why has her case inspired so many conspiracy theories over the years? Let's take a look at what really happened to Phoebe Handsjuk. In the moments leading up to the incident, Phoebe Handsjuk was inside a small single-engine helicopter. She was flying from a helipad on the roof of a building in Midtown Manhattan all the way out to the Brooklyn Bridge. At the controls was Trevor Causer, a 37-year-old pilot and experienced flight instructor. He'd been hired by Phoebe's boyfriend to give her a tour of the New York City skyline. With them in the chopper was another couple, Brian and Nicole Steinberg. They sat in the back of the aircraft while Trevor took them on the ride of their lives. But as the helicopter flew past the Manhattan Bridge toward the East River, everything changed. Eyewitnesses said they heard a loud bang before seeing a woman fall from the aircraft. She fell straight into the river below and vanished beneath the dark water. The pilot immediately turned the helicopter around and returned to the scene, but there was nothing he could do. When he called 911, the woman had already disappeared. Meanwhile, a Coast Guard vessel and several NYPD boats raced to the scene. Divers were deployed into the water, but after searching for an hour, they found no trace of the woman. At this point, the police believed she may have been injured during the fall and managed to swim away. However, they had no idea where she could have gone. As the search continued, more details began to emerge. The missing woman was identified as 26-year-old Phoebe Handsjuk. Her family released a statement saying they were praying for a miracle. But sadly, a miracle was not forthcoming. The following day, the police recovered a body from the river. Although it was badly decomposed, it was soon identified as that of Phoebe Handsjuk. A full autopsy revealed that she had suffered blunt impact injuries consistent with a fall. Her death was ruled as an accident. But many people were left wondering if this was really the whole story. While the police were able to piece together the events leading up to the fall, there were some unanswered questions. For example, exactly how did Phoebe fall from the helicopter? The pilot, Trevor Causer, claimed that Phoebe opened the side door of the helicopter to take a photo when she suddenly fell out. He said he tried his best to grab her, but it was too late. He described her as being like a rag doll as she floated away from the helicopter and into the river. He claimed that he immediately turned the helicopter around and returned to the scene, but by that time, she had already vanished. However, many people found the pilot's story to be hard to believe. If Phoebe fell from the open door of the helicopter, why didn't she fall forward onto the seats behind her? Why did she just float out of the helicopter and into the river? And why didn't the helicopter's emergency locator transmitter alert the authorities right away? The fact that the pilot waited 20 minutes to report the accident raised eyebrows. Many people felt that something was off, but without solid evidence, they had no choice but to accept the official ruling of accidental death. The case made headlines across the world. Everyone wanted to know how a young woman could fall 12 stories from a helicopter and survive the fall. Even if she was in a free fall, she would have hit the water at over 125 miles per hour. There was no way she could have survived a fall like that. So how did she fall in the first place? This is where things get a little bit murky. One thing we know is that the helicopter had a top speed of just 92 miles per hour. Even if the pilot was going the full throttle and Phoebe fell from the side door, she wouldn't have been traveling much faster than 125 miles per hour. But eyewitnesses claimed that the helicopter was moving very slowly when the woman fell. If that's true, then surely the woman would have hit the water at well under 100 miles per hour. It would have been painful, but survivable. Surely she wouldn't have died from the impact. At this point, the investigators were no closer to solving the mystery of how the woman fell. So they looked at the victim's background to see if anything in her past could help explain what happened. What they found out shocked them. Phoebe Handsjuk was the daughter of multimillionaires. Her father owned a large chain of retail stores in Australia. Her brother owns a multi-million-dollar advertising company. Phoebe grew up in a mansion in Sydney's most affluent suburb. She went to an exclusive private school where fees cost over $32,000 per year. Phoebe came from money. She never had to worry about buying a new dress or paying for a weekend in New York City. So why would she need to sneak onto the roof of a building and climb into a helicopter to get a better view of the city skyline? To answer that question, the investigators looked at security footage from the night of the incident. What they saw made them question everything they thought they knew about the case. The footage showed Phoebe and her boyfriend walking toward the building where the helicopter was taking off from. At first, they stood back and watched the helicopter depart. But after a few minutes, something made them change their minds. Without hesitation, Phoebe ran toward the open door of the helicopter and climbed inside. Then the aircraft took off and headed south toward the Brooklyn Bridge. With this vital piece of evidence in hand, the investigators had a good idea of what happened. As the helicopter reached its destination, Phoebe decided she wanted to get a better look at the bridge. Instead of waiting until the helicopter got closer, she climbed out of her seat, opened the side door, and fell out. Simple as that. But this raises a few more questions. Why would she have been in the back of the helicopter in the first place? If she wanted to take a photo, why didn't she ask the pilot to fly closer? And why didn't she stay in her seat when the helicopter reached the bridge? These are all good questions, but ultimately there are no answers. With all the evidence pointing to accident, the case was closed. But the victim's brother refused to accept the official ruling. He believed his sister's death was no accident, but instead foul play. He pointed to inconsistencies in the pilot's story and the fact that the helicopter's emergency beacon was never activated. The media quickly picked up on the story, and soon Phoebe's name was being dragged through the mud. Some people said she was trying to take a selfie when she fell. Others said she was trying to steal the helicopter and fly it to California. Some people even claimed that she was murdered and the pilot helped cover up the crime. And all the while, the pilot maintained his innocence. He claimed that Phoebe simply opened the door to take a picture and fell out accidentally. He said he had no part in her death. Unfortunately, the pilot was never given a chance to defend himself. Less than a year after the incident, he was killed when a helicopter he was instructing in crashed into a Long Island golf course. He died at the scene along with two others. In the end, we may never know what really happened to Phoebe. The truth is, we don't know how she ended up in the back of the helicopter or why she decided to open the door and fall to her death. Maybe she was trying to snap a selfie. Maybe she was trying to escape. Or maybe the pilot was telling the truth and she simply fell out by accident. The truth is, we'll never know what really happened. And that's what makes the case of the woman who fell from a helicopter so terrifying. Even years later, people are still coming up with theories to try to explain how she fell 12 stories and survived. But here's the question. Was this truly an accident, or is the real story still hidden? What do you think? Let me know in the comments below. And don't forget to come back soon for another video.